Easy for me in my marriage to look at my wife, Jody, and say, hey, I put in hundreds of hours this year on getting better. By the way, what have you done? Okay.
I need the log.
Yeah, it's not great, right? Anytime I ask that question, the challenge really is like, what's my growth opportunity? And it's, can I love somebody at their own pace? Or do they have to do the work I'm doing at the pace I'm doing it to qualify for this relationship?
Hey guys, welcome back to the Something New Show. This is Mindy Linscomb, your host. I'm in my home today with one of my favorite people to talk to. This is Jason VanRuler. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yes, we have been trying to make this work for a long time, but being the fact that we live in very different places and you and your wife have children, we have a lot of children and lots of work to do, it's hard to get schedules together.
It's true.
But we're excited you had to get to Lost Valley Ranch in Colorado this week, and thanks for flying in early to get a couple episodes recorded because the things that you specialize in are so helpful for the people we serve. So Jason is a therapist and an author and just a really funny guy. And we became friends a few years ago. We met through a personal branding company called Brand Builder Group. And that's an incredible company by our friends. And we loved that we got to meet. And Jordan was there that day too.
Yeah.
We got to just extend a friendship. And the things that you are able to solve problems for and also just ideate around are really the heart matters to me that are more important than just making money.
Yeah.
And as a therapist, you've just helped people for so many years. I'd love for people to maybe just get a glance of the work you've done. If you don't mind, I know it's hard bragging on yourself for a second. If you don't mind just saying, hey, here's what you've been up to, what you've done. And I do want to do a couple parts to this episode. So it's going to be a little longer, but give us some context for like, where did Jason begin his career and what are you doing now?
Yeah, well, this should just take a couple hours. So I'll go through my whole resume. This is going to be so exciting.
So
for
exciting
listeners.
for people. I know, right?
Let's see. So I always wanted to be a therapist. That was like always a dream of mine ever since being a kid. So I actually journaled about it. And I think it's because I always dressed like a therapist. And so career options were limited. And then when I learned that you could get paid to overthink things, I was like,
really? You're like, I could do that.
This is easy. So then I got married and at the time had a recruiting company and just had always felt called to work with people on a deeper level. Not that I didn't love recruiting, but it was adjacent to where I really wanted to be. And so went back to school, became a therapist, worked in the Department of Corrections for a long time in federal government, where I'd work with people coming out of the prison system into the community. And so trying to figure out how do you help somebody actually have sustainable growth? And that was really catalytic for me and led to kind of some trauma work. And so then I did a bunch of work with like Navy SEALs and child soldiers and just the messy stuff, which I really enjoyed a lot. And then from there, I've kind of walked into, and this has really been in the last probably 6+ years, working with high performers and teams on relationships.
Wow. I know that relationships really are the lifeblood, whether that's, co-working relationships, colleagues, family, marriage, friendship. I do want to dive into the questions that I told you. I was like, I kind of went deep already today, but the last book that you wrote, which can you tell us the name and what it was about? You'll do a better summary than I.
Yeah, it's Get Past Your Past. And so it's how we overcome some of those hard things we've gone through.
Okay. So when you think about being stuck, just in general, what are you seeing people come to you for and they're saying, hey, over the years, this is probably why you wrote the book, but I'm just saying there's probably a pattern where you're like, people are stuck.
Yeah.
And what would you say like is the common theme that you've identified people are stuck with?
I think they're stuck and they understand the problem, but they don't understand why they're not changing. So everyone that comes to me, they have a pretty good idea of what the problem is. No one's really like, I don't really know the problem. They know the problem. What they're unsure about is what to do to get through it. And so I think if you have those places in your life where it's seemingly common sense, but it's not, that's probably connected to a past experience.
Really? Interesting. Okay. And do you feel like there's a desire in most individuals to get unstuck, or do you feel like sometimes it's just someone that they're married to saying, "Hey, fix them," like, and then they're saying, "I don't know what's wrong."
Yeah, both. Both. I mean,
Okay.
I think we all want to be unstuck. I mean, no one likes being stuck. I think we also don't like doing the work to get unstuck. So a lot of people kind of bargain, and it's like, if I could just not be stuck and not have to do the work, that would be awesome. And I'm like, yeah, that would be awesome. I don't know how to do that, but that would be great.
So there's a whole process, and do you cover that in the book a little bit of
Yeah.
how to work through the work, if you call it that?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a little confused because therapists will say, like, do the work or the process, or, and I'm a very, like, literal guy. So I'm like, where is the process? What is the work? I didn't really understand. And so what I did is I just took what I do with clients and broke it down into the book and just said, this isn't meant to, like, do everything the way it's supposed to happen, but it should give you kind of a taste of what you need to do if you want to work through
Could
something.
you work us through? Can you talk us through that process?
Yeah, it requires looking back at sort of what happened. So we want to initially connect the dots to me feeling stuck today versus a parallel experience I had oftentimes in childhood. So if it's like, well, I just, chronically feel stuck in my relationship because I never use my voice, and I know I really should, but I just never stick up for myself. My prompting to you is going to be, tell me about a time when you were a kid and you felt that same way. And when we start to think about, like, the lines drawn between those, we can start to see the narrative that we tell ourselves about that story and how that plays out today. So for instance, using that example, you might tell yourself, well, my voice doesn't matter, or what I say doesn't carry any weight, or people don't want to hear me. And then we make that true as adults. And so the first step is kind of going back and saying, where did we go off track? And then how do we change our relationship with that experience?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Do you ever find people say, like, I just can't recall a time, or I
Mm-hmm.
can't think of something,
Totally. Yeah.
and it
And
just
that's
takes,
okay too. Um, Usually when I hear someone say, like, I just can't think of a time, I'll just say, okay, well, tell me, even outside of childhood, when is another time you felt this way? Because what happens when we feel stuck is there's no shortage of times to pull from. So maybe childhood is tough to recall, but you might say, well, in my 20s, I felt this way, or 30s, or so we start to look at those experiences, just say, like, what is the common thread between all of them, and why is that, and is it accurate?
yeah. Well, I was just joke. I mean, I'm sincerely asking it because I was joking with somebody the other day. I said, I this is all blurry to me trying to recall some memories, and I call it BCE. And I joke about it as before cancer, but
Okay.
like when my son had cancer, I just feel like life was like super clear after for my memories. Like I can
Mm,
like remember so much, but like before that, it's all blurry. I don't know how to explain. Maybe that's a whole nother conversation, but I'm like, my kids will tell me a story of a vacation we went on, and I'm like, I don't remember that. Like, I mean, I remember the
mm,
trip,
yep.
but like the details are just kind of blurry. But maybe events do trigger memory. Like there's only a certain
Yeah.
amount of space up here. I'm
Well,
like,
I feel like
that
some
is
days I've maxed out that
the
space.
hard
So, like,
drive
yeah,
is maxed out.
it
Yeah.
is full. I mean, here's the thing: when we have really traumatic experiences,
Hmm.
our brain sometimes says, "Hey, you can't deal with this. I've got this," and it just kind of shuts off.
Hmm.
And so we don't remember that stuff. And so does it come out later? Sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes not.
Hmm.
And that's okay, because again, our brain's just trying to help us get through it.
Yeah.
And so it's not uncommon to have an experience like that where you go, lots of clarity maybe after or before, but then this event happened and it changed. That's not unusual.
Okay, so I hope I didn't interrupt you, but in that process in your book, you said so. First is to identify, hey, when did I first feel this way, and then what
Hmm.
was after that?
Yeah. And then what is the lesson I took away from that? Now, oftentimes the lesson we take away from it is maybe even accurate in that context, but not today's context. Right. So it's sort of like, imagine someone comes to me and they've got a childhood where they're too much. Okay. And so they take away from that experience, I'm too much. I can't be my full self.
Did you read my journals?
I did.
Okay.
I've been prepping. I've read all the
Okay, okay,
journals.
no, I'm totally
Um,
joking.
but what you take away from that is, well, I'm too much. I have to kind of like monitor myself. I have to be small. And what's true is maybe you were too much for the family you were born into. So maybe that was a very true thing, is that where you were born, they just didn't have a lot of emotional capacity. But the question then becomes, is it still true today?
Mm.
Right? If I find a different tribe, I find a different community, does that still ring true? Well, no, it doesn't. And so sometimes we have to understand that even though it made sense then, it no longer makes sense today.
Yeah. Okay. And what's next?
Yeah. So then we take that and we start to kind of see it for what it is, right? Which is that everything makes sense in context. And so we start to understand that when the context and environment changes, we do too. And so we say, who am I surrounding myself with now that represents the message I want to hear? Right? And represents what's true for me. And if I don't have that, how do I grow into that community and that person that tells themselves a different story? Right? So if it's like, well, if I am always too much in any place that I find, what do I need to do for work to be a little less? Or if I'm always too much, how do I find my people who don't think I'm too much? So what do I do now, knowing where I came from and what that taught me about who I want to be in the future?
And one of the very simple things I always tell my coaching clients about life in general, if you don't like it, change it.
Right.
And it's just the realization of, okay, I have a choice actually here. I have a choice. And that's a really big realization for some people.
Yeah.
To pause and say, oh, I can change it.
Yeah.
And I remember a counselor, and not a therapist, but a counselor would always tell me, healthy people have choices. And I pause in that and go deeper when I feel frustrated. And I say, okay, I have a choice.
Yep.
And to your point here is like, you have a choice of who you surround yourself with. You have a choice of, who you work with. You have a choice of who you get to marry. In some cases, maybe that choice changed over the years. And so that's a really deep thought, is like, what would you talk through with a couple that they're like, well, I'm not liking this marriage. I did choose it, and I value a covenant relationship that I chose and promised this person till death do us part. But yeah, if that's not going so well, how does that fit into that philosophy, right? And so it's like, I want to be a healthy person for Jordan, but I have taken off the table like the choice to leave when I don't like things. But I do believe I have a choice to improve this relationship. So it's kind of like that mixture of, hey, Jordan, this is how I'm feeling. I want to work towards unity here. That means I have to work on some things. You have to work on some things for us to stay married, because that's not the choice and solution we prefer.
Right.
But in general, what would be some choices that maybe a couple could make when they're having problems, if they're trying to be healthy and stay together, but feel frustrated?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. And here's what I'll tell you. If you're pointed in the same direction with what you want, that's the best first place to start. So if it's like, we want to stay married no matter what, awesome. Then we have stability and we have a good foundation.
Okay.
If you have that and you go, well, here's where we started, Jason, and here's where I am today. I've grown, maybe they haven't, or I've changed, maybe they haven't. The question I would usually ask is just, what is this tension teaching you? What's the lesson here for you, not for them, right? So a lot of times we're kind of them focused. And so we're like, well, I've changed and I've done all the work, and you haven't, right? And by the way, as a therapist, like, my life is committed to self growth and development. And so I'm always doing that. So it's easy for me in my marriage to look at my wife, Jody, and say, hey, I put in hundreds of hours this year on getting better. By the way, what have you done? Okay.
I need the log.
Yeah. It's not great, right? Anytime I ask that question, the challenge really is like, what's my growth opportunity? And it's, can I love somebody at their own pace? Or do they have to do the work I'm doing at the pace I'm doing it to qualify for this relationship? And if that's what the relationship is about, then when have there been times where I haven't pulled that weight?
Looking for the perfect vacation spot to disconnect from everything, put your feet in the softest sand, and enjoy a fresh, renovated 2-bedroom, 2.5-bath townhouse right on the beach in my favorite place in the world? Well, 30A is situated in the panhandle of Florida, and I'd love for you to check out Something Blue 30A on Instagram and make it the perfect place for your next vacation.
Because there's definitely been times where Jody's been light years ahead of me and had to patiently wait and say, I hope he catches up. And so I always ask people, just what's the lesson in this season? And maybe it's patience, maybe it's kindness, compassion, but it's almost never what we want it to be, right? We're like, I think the lesson is they need to try harder. And it's like, is that really the lesson?
Interesting. I like that you said, though, you have to make sure you're going in the same direction before you get in the weeds
Yeah.
on who's doing what and how, like, what kind of improvements are being made. It's like, are we going in the same direction, life goal here?
Because you need a firm foundation, right? So I mean, if it's like we're not even in agreement on making the relationship last, then it's kind of a waste of time to be refining the details if we don't agree on the big stuff. So do we agree on the big stuff?
What are some of the questions you ask people to determine if they're agreeing on the big stuff?
Yeah, I mean, are we committed to a relationship that lasts? Are we both saying that even though it's a difficult season, we want to end together? Is legacy is that important to us, and is it important that we do that together? Like a lot of these questions, if you can't answer yes, we're wasting time talking about how you communicate because people need to be safe to be vulnerable, right? So if I'm going to ask you to change, but you're unsafe, it's unlikely you're going to be very creative or take a risk, right? Because why would you? And
Mm-hmm.
so if we don't have safety first and a stability, people won't change. So it's like if you want them to change, give them safety.
Mm, that's so good. Okay, so back to the process of getting unstuck.
Yeah.
Where do we leave off?
Yeah. Well, we were talking about what's our relationship, right? With it, what's the narrative we've told ourselves? How does that play out day to day? The other part is just how do I grieve what maybe is not what I wanted or not what I expected? I think a lot of people miss that we all have dreams and goals, and sometimes we don't get them. And that's a big bummer.
I would say a lot of times, not even
Yeah.
sometimes. I think
Yeah.
that the one of the biggest helps we can give our kids is setting them up for the fact that, like, dream really big, but also be really flexible to know that not all your dreams will come true.
Yeah. Because we'd be terrible people if we got everything we wanted, right? So,
Yes,
so we're not supposed to get
absolutely.
everything, but it's also okay to grieve or to mourn what isn't. You know, I dreamt I'd be 6 feet tall. I'm 5'11" and a half on a good day. But I just didn't make it, Mindy. And so I'm allowed to be sad about that. But there's a reality, which is that's the world I live in. And that's a funny example, but like sometimes in relationships, it's not maybe the marriage we dreamt of. It can be good, but it's maybe not how we envisioned it. And so can we mourn some of those things?
Wow. And mourning and grieving isn't just like the acknowledgement of loss, correct?
Right.
What's more? What's
Yeah.
how would you describe, like, hey, somebody properly grieved?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's acknowledging what you wanted and what you expected and recognizing you didn't get it and still loving the person anyway. Right. Still saying, even though you're not exactly who I wanted you to be and you didn't show up just how I expected, I still love you. There are days that are hard about that, but I still love you in that space.
So, but what if it's not the marriage? What if it's the career that you thought you wanted, or, um, the relationship with adult parents, which
Hmm.
I've been reading about, just the amount of disconnectedness there
Yeah.
is with adults and their adult parents. It's really sad.
Yeah.
Like,
There's a lot of parental estrangement right now.
estrangement is
Yeah.
huge. In fact, one of probably your colleagues is specializing in
Hmm.
estrangement because it's like such a need in our society. So I'm just thinking about the grieving, even that. So when you say, hey, somebody is properly grieved, what would you say they've properly grieved looks like?
Yeah, I think making peace with it and being aware of what it is versus what you expected. I think sometimes people just sort of dig their heels and they say, I want it to be this or else. And that's not really in touch with reality because sometimes you just don't get that. And so the grace is, okay, I didn't get that. What do I have? And how do we make the best of what I have? It's hard.
This is so hard.
Yeah.
And you don't think that's like settling? Like, just, how, like, our entrepreneur, like, business coach friends
Sure.
is like, don't settle for less, like, push yourself every day to have the best, da 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 da. But I would say it's not settling if you personally have done everything you can
Right.
to have the outcome you wanted. It's when you say, hey, Mindy, it's like making peace with. To me, is letting go of what I had hoped for,
Hmm.
simply at the point when I decided I did everything I personally could. And now it does require another person to engage with that process.
Right.
So then it's okay. It's not like settling for less and being lazy. Now it's
Right.
making peace with simply because as an individual, I did everything I could.
Yep.
Is that what you say is
And
like
that's
the
all I can do. Healthy
correct?
relationships are invite only and it takes two. And so you can do all of your part. And if they're unwilling, they're unwilling. And you can grieve that. You can be sad about that. But I think at the end of the day, what we're looking for is not to settle with ourselves, right? It's so have I done all the things I need to do? And then acknowledge and understand that they might not. And that's really hard because sometimes people don't want the relationship we do and it doesn't make sense.
So interesting. Okay, so keep going with that process.
Yeah.
So they acknowledge, make peace with.
Yeah.
We're
They're
still getting
grieving it.
unstuck. They're
Yeah.
grieving it.
Yeah. And then what is a more helpful narrative to tell myself about what happened? So it might have been, if we go all the way back to the you're too much, right? It might have been, here's what's true. I was too much for the family I was born into. Okay. For whatever reason, they had expectation and ideals, and I just was too much for them. But what's true today is I'm not too much for the people that I really care about and love. They actually love it. And so what's true is I'm too much for some people, but not everyone. And my job is to find people who appreciate me, not that are overwhelmed with me.
Okay, so I love the changing the narrative. Is that the wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is just being open to changing it again. If we grow throughout our whole lives, we will see things with a new perspective if we do it well, right? I always believe if you're looking back at a year and you're not kind of cringing about some of the things you said and did, you're not growing, right? The goal is not to look back at every year and say I did it perfectly because you're stalled out. So if we're doing this work now, we should just keep growing. And in a couple of years, you might look at it again and say, oh, I need to change some things.
That is so encouraging. When you said that if you're not looking back at it, you're cringing over some of the things you said and going like, oh, I can't believe I did that. I beat myself up over those things. But like you're saying, it's a sign of growth that you could recognize you did some stupid stuff.
Don't you think?
Yeah, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. And isn't that the goal?
Yeah.
Right? Because if you just look back and you have a lot of pride and you go, well, everything I did was great and perfect all the time. Okay.
It's not a super humble heart posture.
Well, and how did you do that? How did you do it all perfectly? And are there other problems then? And sometimes then it's like, well, you've got a self-awareness problem. So I mean, I think if we're truly growing, we look back and we go, ooh. But that's a life well lived.
So you're cringing every year.
I'm cringing every month at this point.
I love
yeah,
it.
I mean, I look back and I'm like, ooh, I don't know about that.
That was rough.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Like that's the best of it. Is taking a risk, being vulnerable, and seeing what sticks.
I love that. And then owning and apologizing, right?
Yeah.
And saying, hey,
Hey, when you miss it, make amends and move on.
I love that. I do have some people on this podcast in our audience that are career moms, and I would say sometimes it's hard to. This position is interesting. It's and I'm just thinking about the unstuckness. I feel like there's a tension to want to be really good in both arenas. Probably same for dads,
Yeah.
but a little bit different in the sense that how do I explain the pressure? Well, I just sit across the table from a lot of people like me that say, and I think it ties into your unstuckness, that say like, hey, I feel like I can only go so far, or I can only be so tough. Or if I were to say this as a man, this would be no problem. But because I'm a woman, it comes across defensive. It is too much. I get to a spot where I feel stuck in my career because maybe I am a female. But in order to show up differently, I'm expected to be all these things to all these people. So I don't know if you've dealt with a lot of career moms, and if you've seen some of the things that they struggle with, but could you apply some of your unstuck methodologies to some of those people listening that might say, hey, here's some tips for you as you're feeling just how do I show up? I feel like maybe I'm failing in both areas because I'm trying so hard to be good at one. And when I'm really good at one, I'm not good at the other.
Right.
And then it's always that, okay, now I'm going to pendulum swing, become the better mom, but now work is suffering. I don't know. It's a really unique era that we're in, where I
Yeah.
feel like more than ever, moms are working outside of the home over 60 some
And have
percent
to,
and
right?
have to because
Yeah.
of financial burden. And sometimes the mom can become the sole proprietor, like the sole provider, um, if her career is advancing and doing well.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I'm really interested your thoughts around your studies and your work, about the past, getting unstuck, new narratives, and forging ahead into a career and mom slash sister, daughter, friend, all those support roles that we do have in the female space. And I'm curious if there's any overlap in some trends that you're seeing with the work that you do.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a really good question. I get the honor of working with a lot of female executives and entrepreneurs and founders. And while not a female, I understand pretty well what you're talking about, which is I think it's a little bit easier for guys because they can talk about limiting beliefs from childhood and then maybe not have them today. I think what's really hard for women is a lot of times that's still happening, right? So if you're a woman who was told they were too much in childhood, you probably still are being told that today. And so the difference for men is like, oh, well, that was then, this is now. I think for a lot of the women I work with, they're like, oh, no, that's still happening today, Jason. That's not just like somebody told me that in childhood. There are like people around me saying that. And so I think there's what was said, what I think, and what's true. And so what I try to help them with is just what's true, right? Because there's what people are telling me, and that's not always in our best interest. There's what I feel or tell myself, which is maybe I'm telling myself I'm not good enough or not doing well, and then there's what's true. And so we try to spend a lot of time on what's true and kind of seeing like, does that fit? And if it doesn't, what do we need to do instead? But yeah, I think the burden for women is that we kind of have this expectation like you have to be all things to all people all the time. And you feel that, I would imagine, and then you don't have enough time to actually manage that well, but you're
Mm-hmm.
scrutinized.
Mm-hmm.
And as a man, I would just say I feel like sometimes we kind of get a pass. We get a pass to kind of be the fun one or the one that kind of gets to go around and do all this stuff, and that's just sort of built in. And we don't always have to spend so much time thinking about who we're being as a caretaker or some of those other things.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So, um, if somebody was doing this work a little bit independently before they
Mhm.
can see a therapist, what are some ways that they can focus on what's true?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think like literally writing it out. So literally writing out, and I would just make like 3 columns on a sheet of paper and just say like what I'm being told, what I'm thinking, feeling, and then what is true, and try to be objectively true with that. Right. So it's sometimes with people, what we have to do is just redefine how they're examining and analyzing what they're doing. So they'll say, well, I'm feeling like a failure. And I'll say, well, how do you define failure? Let's talk about that, right? There's your version, there's the world's version, and then there's maybe this version in between. Let's focus on that a little bit. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times, if we can update our definition of some of those words, we start to see the world differently.
I I love this exercise simply because I've tried to keep a yearly exercise practice in my own, you know, resonances. I'm like, hey, I what are some untrue things I'm hearing in my playlist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then how can I counteract them with the truth of what I know is true about myself or my values? And then I try to read them out loud. And I do it on a voice memo because
Mm.
I heard there's something about listening to your own voice, and then I play it in my own voice.
Oh, I like that.
So, and
Yeah.
I really want to do this with my kids,
Mm-hmm.
where maybe they have some untrue things that they're hearing about themselves at school with friends or themselves, and then rewriting that script to be like, no, actually, and in my case, what does God say about you?
Yep.
Like, because I am a Christian, I like to read some scriptures around, hey, were you made with intentionality? Absolutely.
Right.
You're not a waste,
Yeah. If I take
So,
this to prayer, what is God telling me in prayer? Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Um, okay, so I'm imagining that there are some of us that don't think we're stuck,
Mm-hmm.
but we might be.
Okay.
And so, what would be some clues, some external clues to
Mm-hmm.
identify, hey, we might have some deeper things going on?
Right.
What would you say?
Probably 3 things. I mean, I think things that you don't want to talk about are usually stuck points, right? So if I were to say to you, hey, in your life, in your relationship, what is the number one thing you don't want to talk about? You probably know what it is. It's probably a stuck point, right? I think it's literally where you feel stuck. And then also, if you were to hire a consultant or a coach to look at your life, what do you think is the one place they would tell you you need to do something about? So if you don't see it, what do you think somebody else would say? And it's kind of an interesting thought thing because we always know, right? It's just like, well, if I brought in a coach or consultant, Jason, they'd probably say this is an issue. And I go, great. What do you want to do with that?
And then are there any sort of physiological
Mm-hmm.
clues?
Well, anxiety, depression, just those things, right? But where in my life do I feel a physiological response that doesn't match the situation, right? So when I'm working with somebody, sometimes we'll see a situation where, let's just say on intensity, it's a 2 or 3, right? But we react with a 10 or 11. Well, that's about some past experience, right? Because it's loaded for us. It's a wound. And so it's kind of this idea that I have about trauma, and wounds are like sunburns that people don't see. And so if someone bumps your shoulder and you're sunburned, but you have a shirt on and they don't see it, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to have a big reaction, right? Now, why do you have that? Is it because you want to be mean or rude? No, because you're recoiling from a wound that they didn't see. And so we want to look in our life and just go like, where are those sunburns that I'm kind of avoiding?
So fascinating. So fascinating. Okay, I'm going to go through here and just wrap this episode up with
Yeah.
a few remaining questions um, regarding overwhelm.
Mm.
Okay, so um, is there a small micro habit
Mm.
that Jason recommends regarding just preventing or dealing with overwhelm?
Yeah. I mean, on overwhelm, the first thing I would say is maybe you are for a reason. So I get a lot of people coming to me and they say, I don't want to feel overwhelmed. Help me not feel overwhelmed. And I go, great. Tell me about your schedule. And then they proceed to tell me about a schedule that's overwhelming to me. I'm like, this is not even my schedule and I'm overwhelmed. So the first thing is maybe you should be. Maybe your body is legitimately telling you you're overwhelmed because you are. Now, if you're not, then what about it is bringing you stress? Because overwhelm is really about feeling stress and like we're beyond our capacity. So where are we beyond our capacity? Is it emotional capacity, intellectual? Is it our stress? Is it physiological? Like where are we beyond that limit? And then what limit do we need to put in place instead?
Interesting. So start with the schedule.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just say somebody says my schedule is very manageable. They're working at a great job according to their skill sets, but they're dealing with overwhelm all the time. And I mean, I'm even thinking about some of the responsibilities that working parents have. Is like there can be the best schedule of the week planned,
Hmm.
but there's a million details to manage those schedules.
Yep.
Just what would you say is just like talking about that more or working with your spouse to manage some of those details better?
Yeah, what works best for you? So I think it's kind of figuring out, like in an ideal week, what's going to be the best way for you to approach it. I'm a email person. If you email me, I'll remember. If you tell me, it's difficult for me to kind of say, oh yeah, we talked about that on Tuesday. So what's kind of the ideal way for you to take that information? The other thing is like if you're chronically overwhelmed, but it's hard to explain why, a lot of times it's because we're not quite in the right chair, right? We're doing something that, although might be really rewarding or pay us well, is not actually where we're supposed to be. And that's usually the tension that's coming up is something's not quite right.
I love that. So, what questions do you ask your spouse or your friends if you can see this and you're like, okay, how can we come alongside?
Yeah. I mean, I think, are you in the right chair? Right. So, I mean, that's a really good question is as you're looking at your life, is this a life that you feel called to? Or is this a life that you wanted or you feel like you're supposed to be living? And if not, why not? Right? If it is, then what are my expectations about it? I see people get in trouble with expectations because they go, I want to do it all, but I want it to be easy. Can't do it all and have it be easy. So sometimes we have to redirect our expectations and just say, like, it's supposed to be hard, right? If it was easy, everyone else would do it. And so, I've got a good friend and he has climbed some mountains and I just like, how do you do that? Is it easy? That was one of the questions I asked. Is it easy to train for that? And he's like, no, it's really, really hard. He's like, people die trying to do this. He's like, it's going to be difficult. So sometimes the high performer, I'll just say, like, if you want to have the best company in the world, or you want to hit this achievement, or you want to have this kind of family, it's going to be hard.
Mm-hmm.
So understand that. And instead of being chronically overwhelmed because your expectations don't match, set accurate expectations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that deciding what your capacity looks like is another element to all of that because I I live and work and breathe in an entrepreneurial world,
Mm.
and there's always like the next thing and the next expansion and the next level, right? And a lot of times people feel this tension when they come to me saying like, "Hey, well like wouldn't the next step be for me to do this and then open more locations or expand my reach like that?" And I said, "That would be the next level if you were only trying to achieve monetary
Mm-hmm.
success. However, everything comes at a cost."
Right.
And so it's been a lot of like really getting into people's head to realize, hey guys, like is winning doesn't always look like more money or the next level of success
Mm-hmm.
because now your schedule changes
Right.
um, when you expand your companies or your monetary goals. It's like now you have more zeros to be in charge of, more taxes to pay, more employees, more all of that, and it costs you some time away from your loved ones, your friends, your family, and at what expense are you willing to pay? And so it's been really, really good to stop and pause and ask people, it's like, well, when did you want to retire? How much time do you want to enjoy your family every week? Like we've talked about even in our own
Mm-hmm.
careers, it's like, okay, we could take more work, we could take more clients, we can always take more. But at what point do you pause and say, is this the life I want? Is
Mm-hmm.
this living according to my values? And so um, I know many people who have said it's not worth that sacrifice
Right.
to give up with the family. And then I've seen the other where they've sacrificed their family to go
Mm-hmm.
for that next level of success. Um, you are much more studied on the impacts of those decisions. I am trying to have these conversations with people to say, you can do that, and I can help you and guide you to get to that level of success. But is it worth the cost? And to your
Mm-hmm.
point, is reminding them that it will be hard.
Right.
This isn't just a like, oh, I can do this, it'll be easy, because more is always more.
Right.
And it's going to be more work, more cost. And so, yeah, what are you like? I would love to close on this topic with this first episode because we have a really big topic to talk about in the second one. But what are you wanting people in your life to hear your message when it comes to like what is Jason's thought on um, really making sure that your time and your time spent on earth is really matching your value system so that the priorities get mapped out in the right way because it is a sacrifice and it is hard work whichever route you go.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's always going to be sacrifice. I think the question I ask a lot of people is your family as excited about this idea as you are?
Okay, pause. I want you to say that again
Okay.
and say it for the people in the back. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Is your family as excited about this idea as you are? If the answer is no, then my follow up is always, then why are you doing it?
Whew, okay. My question to you, would you include your children in the word family
Mm-hmm.
or is it just spouse?
Both.
When do your kids not participate in that decision? When they're out of the house
Probably.
or not
Yeah.
even
Or
then?
really young. But I think it's because it costs them. So I think when they're in the house, it directly costs them something. I'll be vulnerable and I'll share just about me. When the Ukraine war started, I had this phenomenal opportunity to design a trauma treatment program for orphans in the war. Okay, could you get a better cause to spend time on? Probably not. Right. So I'm up all night and plotting and making these great connections, and it's literally like this world class. Couldn't imagine a better opportunity. And so I'm talking about I'm going to go to Ukraine. It's really dangerous. You could die over there. There's all this stuff. And professionally, it's the top of the top of the top.
Yeah, you're like so excited.
Totally. But I'm sitting at my dinner table and my kids are there, my 3 kids, and my wife is there. And I'm kind of like boasting about, I can't believe I get to do this. And I'm so excited. And my oldest son looks, and with a tear in his eye, he just says, I don't know why my dad has to save the world. We just want you here. And in that moment, I realized I had lost it. I had lost it, right? Because I thought I was grabbing something for us, and it was something for me. Now, what's hard is, was there benefit to others? Totally. Was there impact? I would never argue that was not a great thing to spend time on. But if my marriage is my ministry and my family is my legacy, I got sidetracked. And that moment changed a lot of things for me, because here's what I learned to be true is they just wanted me. They don't really care how much money we have. I mean, we like nice things, but I mean, there's a certain limit to that. And so at some point I have to ask myself, who is this for? Who does this serve? And am I okay with that? Some things will only serve you, and that's okay if you want to do it, but you have to reconcile the cost.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And I do feel like when you choose to get married and choose to have kids, it shouldn't be their fault that they're
That's
part of that
hard,
dynamic,
right?
right?
Because it's like, I'm just hitting my stride now. They're in the way, it's slowing me down. And it's like, well, I don't think so.
No,
I don't
it's
think
not their
so.
fault. And to that point, too, though, I remind some of my single professional friends, I say to them, you have so much capacity,
Right.
being that you don't have a spouse or children. So get to work. Like,
Yep.
this is awesome.
Love the
Because,
season
like,
you're in.
yes, I'm
it'll
like, oh my
change.
gosh, you have so much.
Yeah.
And some of them may be single forever, and that's going to allow them even more capacity for programs that they could develop and impact they can have. But as soon as any of us choose to get married or have children, we have now interrupted
Right.
the productivity impact. But I don't want anybody to feel bad about that, because that's one of the greatest callings in the world, is to get married and have children. So
Right.
I love that you had that moment. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I don't. I mean, it was painful, but I mean, that moment really set my career on a different trajectory. And I think it was just a really important reminder for me that you can get sidetracked even doing good stuff.
Really
Right.
good
Because
things.
I think sometimes people go, well, you can never do too much good stuff. Well, you can if you're missing the people who need you most.
Yeah. Wow. Did your son ever circle back around and realize that was such a
Yeah, I mean,
moment?
I've talked about it with him, and I think, he would say, well, I didn't know at the time, but it was a very honest and pure thing to say. And for me, what it was is, these are the people who need me. And I think sometimes we kind of neglect that because they don't say the thing all the time. They just kind of go along with it. But in those moments where they speak, we need to listen.
Have you done some things with your kids to help them articulate their feelings?
Yeah. Yeah. My poor kids. I mean, they're therapized. They've got all this
Therapist
stuff.
dad. Okay, so
They're
what
in
are
it.
the things that you've taught them or told them to do?
One of the things that we've been working on a lot lately is just we have two hands, okay? And so one hand is for what I think and what is factually true, and one hand is for what I feel, okay? And so when my kids are struggling, I'll say, okay, what's the thinking and what's the feeling? And I'll have them separate it out. And then I'll just say, what decision do we want to make based on those two things? And the reason I'm trying to help them do it is one of the most emotionally mature things we can do is learn how to acknowledge our thoughts and feelings and make an educated decision. And so I'm trying really hard to help them to kind of be able to space that out. And so sometimes our youngest, it's like the cutest thing. He's like, my sister really ticked me off, Dad. And how I feel is I want to do X, Y, and Z and all this stuff. And he's like, but what I think is I value my sister and I shouldn't do that. And I'll go, cool, which one are you going to pick? And he's like, well, I guess I'll pick the thought one. And so
Wow.
seeing those moments, like that's what I want them to learn how to do in adult relationships.
Okay, this is kind of nerdy, but like when I was getting my master's degree in English as a second language as a certification, nothing crazy. It was just we studied a lot about how our brain works with languages. And when you're teaching a kid a second language, you're not supposed to mix the languages in any common place. Like the best practice is one place, and as far as like birth on, one place, let's just say school is all one language and home is all one language. Or another way to do that is one parent only speaks one language and the other one only speaks one language. So I was learning about this before we had kids. So I was speaking only English to the kids and Jordan was speaking only Spanish. So that kind of, to your point, is like separating the two to keep it really clear. Like this parent goes with these words, this parent goes with these words. And so that way they can differentiate
There's
between the two
clarity
languages.
there.
And so we did that until cancer.
Okay.
And so our first two got a lot of Spanish, which is awesome. But I was going to say, it's kind of like telling your brain to think in two languages.
Yep.
It's like, okay, this is how I operate if I make decisions how I think.
Mm-hmm.
This is how I operate if I make decisions on based how I feel. And I guess it would be a balance of both, right? It's not like sometimes you just do
Different
think.
times call for different things, but as we both know, feelings can get you in a lot of trouble if you don't know that's what's making the decision.
Yeah, I feel like I have the problem, Jason, just full disclosure here, of making decisions without my emotion. That was in my family of origin always that was always like described as being something bad. To choose based on how you feel, you always need to make a logical decision. And so I don't ever really listen to the feelings, which is perhaps an overcorrection.
Okay, we're going to do this with you.
Okay, how do I think I feel? And then sometimes it is appropriate, I think you're saying, to make a decision based on how you feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when we're loving someone well, a lot of times that's the feeling part we have to reflect.
Interesting. So much to talk about.
So much to talk about.
Okay, so part 2, give them a sneak peek. What are we going to cover in those 5?
Yeah, let's talk about communication. Let's talk about building stronger relationships, and really how do we do these things so when we look back, we see that we were pointed in the right direction, doing the right things.
I love it. We're going to talk about the 5 love languages of communication.
Yeah.
I'm excited. All right, stay tuned, you guys, for Jason VanRuler part 2. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the show, rate, review, and share with a friend. Also, follow the Something New Show on Instagram and Facebook. If you want a fuller experience, watch the show on YouTube to help you create a life worth celebrating.